thing. Don't you worry about a thing. Those are the only words I know.
We're on.
Don't you worry about a thing, baby.
You're live.
I am live. I did not know that. Thank you. All right. If you are here, you are in store for a treat because this is week 50. Is that correct? Week 50. Brett Saunders, Gene Golden, Jeff and Jane Greasy, Catherine Jerica, Leah Dunn, Meredith Davis. How are you doing? Sean Manning, Payroll Vault. Peter Glick is in the house, and everybody, don't you worry about a thing, mama. I am pumped for this episode, and we have no more letters from YouTube about background music because I am now head of music as well. Let's see what else is happening. Doug Rutherford is in the house. I think I have Jim Brubaker in the house. Hopefully all of those folks in Colorado, Sean Manning, Jim Brubaker, a couple others. I don't see Chad Angelo yet. Hopefully you survived that little bit of a winter storm, I think, that went blowing through there. We have got a jam-packed evening with you this evening, tonight, and we're going to try to tackle Burgundy, Bordeaux, Napa, and three of the great wine regions in the span of about 56 minutes. Never been done before. Don't try this at home. No animals were hurt during the training of this, so everything is fine. So I want to get started and by the way, happy Sipsters. I like that. 50th, 50 weeks in a row. Give yourself a round of applause. Take a healthy swig off of whatever you have in front of you. I, of course, have a beautiful Pinot Noir vineyard behind me. Denise has the gorgeous downtown cityscape of Bordeaux, which we will be talking about in great detail. So Jan Kiefer, how are you doing? Good evening. Let's, without further ado, dive right in because there is a ton to discuss here. And I need to share some things with you. And if you want, you can, Denise is going to open up some cameras. So if you feel like having your camera turned on, by all means, turn on your camera. So that's a little bit more intimate. And again, this is week 4 of 4 educational wine tasting series. It is the final week of the one-on-one educational series. Next week, we're going to be back to where it all began, and I'll be interviewing winemakers from Napa and Sonoma. So without further ado, there's Catherine, there's Jeff and Jane, looking good in that gorgeous downstairs humble abode. Leah, awesome. All right, I like to see it. So let's start right in with a little bit of an update. A couple weeks ago during our Rhone series, we polled the audience and we asked if you'd be interested in a Rhone cruise or a Bordeaux cruise, and it was hands-on Rhone. Hands down, we hit a little bit of a setback this week because the boat that we were reserving for the Cellar Angels crew, this little dinghy was rented by someone else. So it wasn't the price that bothered us at $235,000 a week. We figured the Angels are worth that. So the other problem was that the hull of the boat is too deep for the Rhone River. So we will keep searching for a craft for our Rhone cruise. So never fear, the Angels have got you covered when we get to the Rhone. But I do want to move along and tell you that we're going to be discussing French origins, the dirt behind Pinot Noir and Cabernet. And the dirt really is literally and figuratively, because we're going to be talking dirt. But I want to pay a special nod to someone who, without their effort, these 4 episodes don't happen. So Ivy, who's behind the scenes and is not fond of being in front of the camera, she's a fantastic photographer, by the way. Hello, Scotland. Scotland's COVID beer coming in nicely. Ivy has put together, I have 20 some odd pages of notes here, just on Burgundy and Bordeaux. And you know, all of us at Cellar Angels have been formally trained in wine assessment, wine tasting, and there's a half a dozen or more agencies that can do that, whether it's the court, whether it's WeSet, whether it's, there's tons of them out there now, certified wine specialists, et cetera. Ivy's gone through a couple of them as well. She actually does much of the tasting notes. She did all of the prep work for these 4 series. And so I want to raise a glass to Ivy because they don't happen without her effort. So thank you, Ivy. Just an excuse for me to drink. So let's talk about Burgundy. All right. we're going to, by the way, we're going to discuss, dive into, and learn about Burgundy. This is normally a 6-month course minimum. So we should get all this wrapped up in about 30 minutes. To understand Burgundy, you really have to go back in time 75 million years ago to France. So when you look at what was happening 75 million years ago in France, you get a pretty good idea of maritime influence. So this is fascinating when you can find the stuff online and look at the plates moving. So here you have the North American plate very close to Europe 75 million years ago. And it is moving in this direction, away from and across the Atlantic. Here you have the Iberia plate, which is now going to be Spain, obviously. But here you have France. France is, for the most part, underwater 75 million years ago. Same with Italy. You can't even see Italy. It's underwater. So Africa, big maritime influence. The Mediterranean sort of taking shape, but for the most part, the Pyrenees are here. But you get an idea of just how much maritime influence, shells, sea life, crustaceans, all of that stuff plays a big part in the soil complexity of Burgundy and also Bordeaux. Keep that in mind when we move over to America. So Burgundy and Bordeaux, Google Earth time. So let's go over to Google Earth. I like Jane. Look, Jane raising the roof on Google Earth. So here we have France now safely for the tourists above water, which is a good thing. If we go into Burgundy, Burgundy on the right-hand side of France begins in Dijon, about, for time's sake, it's about 2 hours southeast of Paris. So if I were to like go up here a little bit, you'd be able to see Paris. Probably shouldn't have done that. Paris is up there somewhere. Trust me on that. But here you have Dijon. So Burgundy is really split into two regions. You have the Côte de Nuit, or the slope of dark grapes. So you have Dijon, Gervais-Chambertin, Nuit Saint George, and then you get down to the city of Beaune. And Beaune obviously is like a bone. It's white. So this is kind of the white grape region, starts down here. A tremendous amount of red wine comes from this small sliver of land. And this, I want you to be thinking of like a patchwork quilt, because when we zoom into some of these places, you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about with regards to how it looks just like a giant quilt spread between these two valleys. And the vineyards are tiny. And we'll dig deep in that in a second, because I want to show you a little bit more before we get into Google Earth, talk a little bit about the winemaking aspects of Burgundy. So they've been making wine in Burgundy for 1,000 years, plus 1,000 years, and not just any wine, Pinot Noir. So when you look at a French wine label, the French have a sense of place, okay? Everyone in France knows what grape grows in what place because it's been growing there for 1,000 years. So when people say, well, why don't you have Pinot Noir on your label in Burgundy? People will look at you and go, because that is all we have grown for 1,000 years. So that is why they don't have it. It's self-evident. They were making, it goes back to the Roman times. The monks were making wines for all the dukes of Burgundy and that sort of thing. And there is a tremendous amount of graft, let's just say, and greed and aristocracies and things that just were not good for the peasants of France. But then again, the peasants had a little bit of an uprising. So you have Vive la France, long live France, the beginning of the French Revolution, land ownership transfers from the government to the people. This was huge back then, because until that point in time, the government owned all the land. And there was an order of succession. It was the inheritance law. And by the way, there was over 400 different laws and interpretations on the succession of land. If you were of military origin, you had one set of rules. If you were of the clergy, you had another set of rules. If you were the firstborn, there was a set of rules that applied to how much land you got. Women, children, illegitimate children, no, they got no land. They got nothing. And it's fascinating to see how that has changed when you put the control of the land ownership and the passing of the land and inheritance back into the people's hands. They still need a lot of rules, but now fast forward to where we are today, and you're going to know all 785 AOCs by the end of the evening. You're not. You're not. It's no one wants to know this many AOCs. AOC, by the way, if you remember from the course a couple of weeks ago, stands for Appellation Origin Controllee. It's a government defined area that if you are in this area, it's very much equivalent to in the California region of AVAs. So you've got the Stag's Leap AVA, the Spring Mountain AVA, the Oak Knoll AVA. So you've got a lot of AOCs. But we're going to break down the basics because you're going to be able to see every single thing right here in these two links. Bringing Burgundy home like it's never been brought home before. Bringing the Burgundy thunder, I think is what they say. So here we have a winery that we are going to look at in a second when we hop back over to Google Earth. So you have Sévigné-les-Bains. It is a premier cru. It is from the Les Poulets vineyard. The domain is Jean-Jacques Girard. Jean is a vigneron. He is not a grower of champagne. He is a negociant. He is a crafter and buyer of wines that have been farmed by individual farmers in Sévigné-les-Bains. So keep that in mind when you see the actual region, the vineyard, and one ER means premier cru. Les Poulets is the vineyard side, and then domain. So now if we go back over to Google Earth, we're going to show you exactly where this bad boy resides. And by the way, let the record reflect, I am the first person to use the vernacular bad boy in the description of Burgundy. So that is not accidental. I think we need to lighten Burgundy up a little bit. So here is this person's, where he crafts this wine. And it's fascinating to see when we do a little bit of walkthrough with Google Earth and we get onto the street level and we go down to his area. Oh, nailed it. Jean-Jacques Girard, vigneron, right here, with the cute little dog sitting at the gate. Every winery has a dog. I don't care if you're in Burgundy. It's unbelievable. So when you think about this area, this is just a city. This is his little area and kind of winemaking cave. You'll see that a lot in Burgundy, caves. Just, you know, pretty nondescript street. Must be garbage day. The cans are out. So that's fine. But this is his negociant lab cave where he crafts this wine. This wine is about $250 to $300 a bottle. So you get a pretty good idea of the special uniqueness of this area. Now, remember, we talked about Grand Crus, or we're going to talk about Grand Crus right now. So there are, oh, I'm sorry, back up. We talked about Premier Crus. I forgot this one. Again, you don't have to write all this down, but it's a good foundation to give you a crash course on Burgundy. So at the bottom rung, if you think of Maslow, these are things that, okay, probably some nice things to have. Chef of the cave, chef of the cave. You hear that a lot. Chef of the cave is the winemaker, the vigneron. They don't have an actual French term for winemaker. It doesn't exist.
Unrelated to the hierarchy.
Unrelated to the hierarchy, chef of the cave. So at the bottom of this, you have regional appellations. Half the total production are these AOCs. Village or village appellations, you'll hear Village Macon, Village Corton, those sorts of areas. They represent about a little over a third. Most of that is white, some of it's red, but now you're talking about the premier crus. They only represent 10% of the overall production from Burgundy, but there's 570 of them. So when you think about that, that's a lot of small, tiny vineyards of world-class pedigree that are contributing a small amount of wine. And that's that ancestral inheritance that I talked about, where you have a number of people that own a bunch of different aspects of a property, 570 of the premier cru, and then the grand cru. These are the grand poobahs. These are the creme de la creme, the highest you can possibly get. There's only 33 of them. 33 out of the 785 are as special as it absolutely gets in the form of Burgundy. And these are wines that people will tell you, these are not everyday wines. These are special occasion wines. These are 20th anniversary wines. These are I retired wines and I'm throwing a party. These are I survived 4 weeks of educational series on sip wines. Those are the types of wines that are the Grand Crus. So when you look at Grand Crus on Google Earth, one thing that's fascinating, if we look at the Burgundy white region, because we just talked about Chablis being a white wine. Chablis is 100% Chardonnay. So if I look up valley, I can see Beaune up here, which is where the white wine region starts. I've got Pommard, which you've heard, Meursault, which you've heard, Pouligny-Montrachet, which you've all heard, Chassagne-Montrachet, Centenay. These are all of the greatest white wine regions in the world, but I don't see Chablis. Where is Chablis? Fascinating to know that Chablis is actually 62 miles away from Burgundy, but still classified as in Burgundy. And it is so special that there are 7 Grand Crus here in Chablis. And one of them just happens to be a winery called Les Clos. Les Clos sits right on this beautiful slope. You see these kind of hillside here. There's a big hill here, big hill here, big hill here. And you just have this tapestry of quilt work, of patchwork, of vineyards up and down these slopes, all facing the city of Chablis. Southern facing, these things get sun all day long. It is a spectacularly beautiful area. And I want to show you the types of soil that you're looking at as it relates to Chablis, which is crazy because here's Les Clos. Whoa, hey, my Google Earth. Who's doing the remote control? So all you see in these vineyards, A, beautiful sloping, B, tons of rocks, C, lots of chalk. So you've got powdery, rocky chalk that produces that minerality in the great Chablis, the great Chardonnays of the world, that absolutely light this region on fire. The Les Clos Chardonnay upon release is about $500 a bottle. So these Grand Cru Chablis are nothing to sneeze at, which is why, every sip we try to have at least 2 or 3 of them just to make certain we appreciate the extravagant lifestyle that we all lead as wine drinkers. So it's a good thing. If you can look down, I'm going to show you a beautiful photo of Les Clos. I have to back out a second. Nope, did that one twice in rehearsal too. There you go. Not a bad little sunset looking down from the top of the vineyard over the town of Chablis. Tell me you wouldn't want to go down into that town, have some scallops, some sort of seafood dish, lobster with 7 bottles of Grand Cru Chablis by yourself and maybe share it. I mean, Chablis looks just like a great area. I was shocked to learn that it's 60 miles away from what is the namesake of Burgundy. But you get a pretty good idea right there of what we're talking about with regards to Chablis. And again, this patchwork of vineyards, it's not owned like you don't see a Camus that owns a whole bunch of vineyards. It's all individual families that have been passed down for generations upon generations and negociants and farmers. So that is actually the insanity of the Burgundy label. You've already got through 4 levels of AOCs, the 33 Grand Crus. Pinot Noir in the north has tremendous versatility, and you don't recognize it until you stop and think and go, okay, that's right. They do make rosé out of Pinot Noir. They make red Pinot Noir, obviously. Anybody had a white Pinot Noir? Yes, you have. They do make white Pinot Noir. There's actually several great white Pinot Noirs being made in Willamette Valley. Really, really good. And of course, they make sparkling out of Pinot Noir. It's by law, it's an ingredient of champagne in champagne. So when you think about it, that's a pretty versatile varietal Pinot Noir, which is fascinating in my opinion. But then for all of my German friends who do not want to be left behind, you have Spätburgunder. That is the extent of my German. I know I can count to 4. I can ask how much is bail and a couple other things in German, but that's really about it. Spätburgunder is the word in German for Pinot Noir. Germany is the 3rd largest producer of Pinot Noir in the world. And not many people knew that. The other thing you can recognize very, very quickly, German Pinot Noir is a fraction of the cost of French Pinot Noir. Now, is a $35 German Spätburgunder gonna knock your socks off like maybe a Romanée-Conti is? I don't know, but at $5,000 a bottle versus 40, I like my socks on. I don't necessarily need to have my socks knocked off at $5,000 a bottle. So that gives you an idea of kind of the crash course on AOCs, the hierarchy of government ownership. The French Revolution disrupted that. The Napoleonic Code disrupted it further, but now you still have the inheritance aspect from families, negociants, and farmers. But you have to go a little bit further behind the scenes because, as I said, Burgundy is all about a sense of place. They know in Burgundy, I'm sorry, France and wine is all about a sense of place. They know in Burgundy we're growing Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. They do, by the way, have a small amount of Gamay, but for the most part, it's Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. I've talked about it. Hundreds of vineyards with hundreds or actually thousands of owners. And you get to see that pictorially, which is pretty cool when you see that little quilt. The inheritance law, it's fascinating to read about this because no one stood a chance for the last 500 years unless you were royalty with regards to land ownership. It didn't matter how much money you made. It had to be blood type of stuff with regards to the ownership. That all changed. Thankfully, it's been changing ever since. And it continues to change. Now, the Côte d'Or, you've all heard of the Côte d'Or, and I'm not talking about the restaurant, which is defunct, that used to be in the Drake Hotel, which was fantastic, by the way. It is referred to as the Golden Slope, from Côte de Nuit down to Côte de Beaune. And if we look at that, you can see this in basically the Burgundy white snapshot I took of Google Earth. So if I pan out a little bit here, from Dijon down to Beaune, Côte de Nuit. In here, this is the Golden Slope. And by the way, this is not that far. You go from here, Dijon to Beaune, it's 22 miles. You can knock that out in an afternoon of tasting. You wouldn't arrive sober, but you could do it. I wouldn't advise it. But think about Chevrets-Chambertin, Nuit Saint-Georges, all of these great, great, great wine regions. I remember we used to carry these in the store, and it was just fantastic to have these. And then you break it down even further, Vosne-Romani, okay? We've talked about Romanée-Conti. So it's all here. I mean, Burgundy has a little bit of everything, but it's extremely difficult to try to break it down in half hour. And again, you could have a Burgundy course in 6 months, and you'll be spending a lot of time on AOCs and the appellations. But just know you've got Côte de Nuit in the north, which is the red wine grapes, Côte de Beaune in the south, and then it goes much further all the way south. And you can see pretty fantastically all the different wineries that are in here. And it is a spectacularly beautiful place that does not disappoint from anybody that's been to the history. When you think about making wine here for 1,000 years is spectacular. Let's hop over to Bordeaux in a second. I'll talk a little bit about something which is interesting with regards to the history of Burgundy. They have a significant amount of pride in what they do, as you can imagine, right? They're farmers. They've been growing grapes here for a long, 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 long time. They don't have the word winemaker in the French lexicon. There's no word for that. Let's enter Robert Parker. Robert Parker, arguably for a period of about 25, 30 years, was the most famous wine critic in the world, bar none. Good, bad, and ugly, in my opinion, of Parker is that the good is he basically brought Burgundy to life. The only people that knew about Burgundian wines in the 60s, 70s, and 80s for the most part was the United Kingdom. They bought 90% of the wines out of Burgundy, and for that matter, the wines out of Bordeaux. That all changed, if you remember, because of the late, great Stephen Spurrier and the Judgment of Paris. So in 1976, that was the wine shot heard around the world. Parker was reviewing the aspects of Burgundy and Bordeaux prior to then and really elevating their awareness. So that's the good. The bad is, in my opinion, I think Parker brought an Americanized flavor to the Burgundian 1,000 years of tradition, and was telling them, hey, you need to be making your wines this way. You need to have far more fruit forward. You need to have no filtering whatsoever. You need to have lots of oak, so it was that big, boisterous, the ugly American type of thing in wine. That's the bad. But the elevation of Burgundy to a world-class producer of wine, he was largely responsible for. He also didn't really recognize a lot of the boisterousness, in my opinion, of his remarks. Francois Faively of the famous, fantastic Domaine Faively sued Parker on principle, because in Parker's review, he made the annotation that the wines Parker was tasting in the cellar with the domains were different than what was being shipped to the United States. And this was the quote that caused the lawsuit. On the dark side, reports continue that Faively's wines tasted abroad are less rich than those tasted in the cellars. Something I've noticed as well, that really did not sit well with Francois Faively, and sued Parker. So this was in 1994. It was ultimately settled out of court, and Faively sued him on principle. It didn't hurt that Faively was independently wealthy and had, I think, several steel mills and offices around the world and that sort of thing. So I find it really noteworthy that people that sue people on principle genuinely have very big bank accounts. So I'm wondering if they would be that litigious if they were a peasant type of thing. Remains to be seen. But that's kind of interesting, because that's really what Parker was known for in Burgundy. He didn't go back to taste all that often, still went to Bordeaux more often than that. And so that's kind of the ugly. Good, he brought awareness to Burgundy, which is great. But the price impact of what Parker did in Burgundy is off the charts. And if you ever get a chance to read the book that came out in 2006, The Emperor of Wine, it's a fantastic read on the influence of Parker in the wine world. I highly recommend it. So now the dirt behind Pinot and Cabernet continues. We've talked about Bordeaux. You have Bordeaux oozing out of you. You're so knowledgeable on Bordeaux. So we're going to go back over to Bordeaux. And remember, 25 million years ago, underwater. Parts of it still likely can be underwater if the Gironde River floods and overflows its banks. But you have the river north of Bordeaux going into the estuary here, and really the Haute-Medoc region, and I'll get into a map in a second. North of Bordeaux is like 80% of where the best Cabernets in the world come from. You've got Pauillac, you've got Margaux, and this region in here, again, a river runs through it. Very well named movie. It's simply the same thing in wine when you look about a maritime influence. All dry riverbeds, all a lot of nutrient rich crustacean soil life that is just so dense and packed, and clay. I mean, it's amazing when you think about what has happened in evolution and how long they've been making here. Left bank, obviously, Cabernet dominant. Right bank, as we've talked about, is Merlot dominant. In fact, we got a bunch of emails with people going, when are you going to have a fantastic Merlot? We've talked so much about Merlot and Cabernet. It's coming up. We've got a very, very wonderful Merlot for you in the next couple of weeks. So that basically gives you an idea of Bordeaux. And this map gives you an idea of the regions of Bordeaux that we just went through. So when I said 55 to 85% of the wines are in the Medoc, the Haut-Medoc, and then 3, 4, and 5, Saint-Estèphe, Pauillac, Saint-Julien. 8, Margaux down here. And look at, when you think about it, here's the city of Bordeaux. So all of those classifications, some of the first growths, they're all north. They're all on the river bottom. So those areas right here is basically, you could see this in a day or two and see some of the greatest wines in the world inside of 2 days and driving about 10 miles from each other. I mean, it's fantastically densely populated of world-class wineries. Hard to beat, hard to beat. Here, by the way, in Bordeaux, the winery holds the Grand Cru class, not the vineyard. In Burgundy, it's all about the vineyard holds it. In Bordeaux, it's all about the winery holding it. Again, Cabernet versatile, but versatile in a different way than Pinot Noir. They aren't making sparkling, in champagne out of Cabernet. They do make Cabernet Rosé. It's tougher because it's a bigger varietal, but it thrives in many places. If you remember from last week when we talked about Cabernet and Bordeaux. I mean, Cabernet likes warm weather. It can grow old world, new world, it grows in Canada. I mean, I refer to it as the dandelion of grapes because it can basically grow anywhere. And remember from last week, it was identified in 1998 as the offspring of Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Franc. So really, when you think about that, what is that, 23 years ago, we actually find out via DNA testing where Cabernet Sauvignon came from. 23 years ago is a blink of an eye. Pairs well. I love Cabernet with a wide array of foods. It is especially those that are high in fat. Okay, burgers, stews, sausages, not necessarily filet mignon. Why would it not go well with filet mignon? All right, Catherine, I can read lips. Correct. Filet mignon is a very lean piece of meat. Not a lot of fat content in filet mignon. So Merlot would go fantastic with filet mignon. Pungent cheeses, okay? Think Roquefort, blue cheese, Gruyere. I can never pronounce that one. Really heavy. The cheeses everyone calls stinky feet. Those types of cheeses. They kill with Cabernet Sauvignon. And there is astounding values in Cabernet Sauvignon. You just have to know where to look. Kind of like what we just showed you with the map in Burgundy. You can go a few feet, a quarter mile, a mile away in the same tapestry of vineyard blocks, the same Cabernet Sauvignon clone, the same rootstock, and it might just be a different name of a winery. And the price is miles apart, which has always fascinated me. So now, we're going to taste both of these wines, and I'm going to open up Denise is going to open up microphones to see if there's any questions. You have control of your microphones. I have control of the censor button. Doug Rutherford with the Jacks. I like it. Coravon, cute. Smart. So
yeah, I don't think I'm
gonna
going to your stopper tonight.
Scotland's opening up the Onorama. So I want to show you also, where'd that map go that I had? Oh yeah, first remember I said, let's compare and contrast Europe with California. So when you look at this, I mean, California is underwater 70 million years ago, and this takes a while to recede. And it's amazing to me when having gone to school in Colorado many moons ago and having a lot of the sea life fossils be unearthed in the mountains is crazy. But now when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. The Colorado Permian Basin area was underwater for a long, long, long time. Most of Texas is underwater. So you get the idea from the influence of maritime influence as it relates to wine production regions in California. Scotland, that's going to be really tight. So I apologize for that. I should have had you open that about 45 minutes ago.
I did, but the first one was corked, unfortunately. So, but luckily I buy extras, so we're good. Well,
that is a smart man. Smart man. So let's talk about this Pinot Noir from the Calais vineyard that Jack's produces. And I will tell you that the Jackson family makes this Pinot Noir from the Calais vineyard. They aren't the only ones that source fruit from Calais vineyards. Chapelet makes a Pinot Noir from the Calais vineyards. It's more expensive than Jack's. That's of course it would be, right? Because you don't come to us for expensive wines, you come to us for the greatest wines in the world without being expensive. I am sad to report that we're out of it. We actually have no more of the Jack's Pinot Noir. So that's unfortunate because this one went quote unquote flying off the proverbial shelves and with good reason. So this Calais vineyard, there's a couple things you have going on here. First of all, it's in an area of California called the Petaluma Gap, and then a sub-region within Petaluma called the Wind Gap. And for those of you that know the Wind Gap region, it's a gap in the mountains. You can see the Pacific Ocean from this vineyard. So that fog comes in off the ocean, very cool at night, blankets the grapes, keeps the grapes at a certain temperature for most of the year. So the temperature range of Pinot Noir growing regions is not as vast or as wide as it is for Cabernet Sauvignon. So as I've said before, and many of you have heard, and most of you likely know, Cabernet Sauvignon, it could be 55 degrees at night and it can go up to 100 degrees during the day, like it does in St. Helena, Calistoga. Cabernet will be fine. Pinot Noir does not like that fluctuation. Pinot Noir likes a narrow temperature band. It is a very, very finicky, very, very temperamental grape. So high fluctuations of weather, not a good thing for Pinot Noir, which is why when you think about what we showed you in Burgundy and that essential river valley with the wind coming through from Côte de Nuit all the way down to Côte de Beaune, it is a very cool area. It's not a lot of beach goers in Burgundy. They aren't going there for spring break, I can tell you that much. Similarly, the Wind Gap region is called Wind Gap because it's windy. And when it's right on the ocean, you just have that cool induction at night that just sucks the fog in off the ocean and just blankets it and keeps that temperature moderate. Very, very cool area for Wind Gap. Now we're going to do what we always do. We're going to talk about assessment. We're going to talk about color, bouquet aroma, and then taste. But you need to know Kirk Vengi is the winemaker. And Kirk is a pretty famous winemaker, not only for the prowess that Kirk has done with his own Vengi vineyards and his consulting jobs, but Kirk's father, Nils Vengi, was the first person to ever get 100-point wine in Napa Valley. And obviously he got that wine from Robert Parker. Scotland, if you're at all cheating on any potential quiz questions, because I see your smartphone, that'll be 10 demerits.
Just checking some March Madness scores, no worries.
I was actually going to update you.
Indiana's not in it this year, unfortunately. So,
it's a good point. So Kirk is a winemaker here at Jack's. They only made 200 cases. And it's just a very, very special wine. When you think about 200 cases at somewhere in the vicinity of $50 a bottle, I think it was $45 on the Cellar Angels website for a Pinot Noir of this caliber, when in fact, similar type Pinot Noirs in Burgundy would be going for $300 of this magnitude. It's a steal at $45. Kirk, it's not a, first of all, Kirk is expensive. He's been the winemaker at Jack's for about 8 years. And when you make only 200 cases of wine, it's almost economically, you won't get a positive return on that. So what you're hoping to do is really just build a community of quote unquote disciples, people that are going to be so loyal to the Jack's brand that they will come and they will buy other wines. They will buy Chardonnays. They will buy the Petit Syrahs, partly because Kirk is the winemaker, but also partly and probably large part, the wine is so damn good. So when you think of this Pinot Noir, I would like all of you, if you want, open up your mics and tell me when you're looking at it with regards to the assessment, the profile of this wine. What do we see? Doug's got the white paper out already. I like it. Is that a scroll of tasting paper or a scroll of toilet paper? You're on mute.
Yes, it's just a scroll of paper towel. I happen to be the white paper near me, but it's not.
Okay. Doug's currently in the bathroom, just assessing his wine.
White.
All right, so everyone, you have to have good light, obviously, and you're going to be looking at it against a white background. Normally you can do it both ways. A lot of people point the glass away from them. I like doing that as well, because that way you get a better sense of the center of the wine all the way out to the rim. So let's hear some colors.
Pale ruby.
Peter Glick on the 3-point line throws out pale ruby.
So I got this, but it's in Italian, so I had to translate it.
So you didn't yell out Paleo Rubio.
I can do that.
I think it's actually, so you matched it up with that color because it actually looks darker than pale ruby.
Well, it's an issue of the light, Martin.
Okay.
And we're here in Chicago, we're not in Florida, where you have a different light.
Stay away from the light, Carol Ann. Pale ruby. What else do we have? I heard Mr. Greasy shout something.
It's the same, but it goes out pretty light to the edge.
Light to the edge. That was the key.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that pale ruby and the tasting notes too.
Oh my God, she got it.
School solution.
Oh my God, it's worth $10, $100 off our next sip kit.
I have a feeling there's some Napoleonic history of succession, maybe some influence cheating that has been going on in the Glick household. I like it.
Can't imagine.
We didn't cheat, Martin.
I like it. Now, if you start naming the aromas word for word, then we know something's awry.
Cherry, strawberry, rhubarb pie.
All right. Who did the tasting notes? You, Ivy?
Probably Ivy.
Because I actually think it's darker than pale ruby, but I think it's definitely pale ruby near the edge. Now you're getting a sense of what happens during tastings. We sit around the table and we have to make determinations on color schemes. And Peter, we actually use those same type of slides as well, where you are trying to match the color hue. It's almost like trying to find the PMS color for a marketing program where you're like, is it this level blue? Is it that level blue? I don't know. I lost the complexity of color with the Crayola box of 64 crayons. I didn't, that was the extent.
128 now. Shame on you.
Not on my side of the tracks, they weren't. Because you remember those ones, the cool kids had the one with the crayon sharpener too in that box. That was good living right there when you had a crayon sharpener.
I am a city boy. You're from the suburbs.
Scotland, crayons were former writing utensils back in the Mesozoic era that Peter and I are familiar with.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, you've seen pictures. All right, so on the aroma, obviously there's cherry, explodes with cherry. Oh, and strawberry too.
Really get the rhubarb.
I'm actually quite upset that we're out of this wine because I freaking love this wine.
Mm-hmm.
This is, I don't know. I'll defer to all of you, but you hear that marketing phrase, I think, where people say, this Pinot Noir drinks like a Cabernet. I'm not certain that's good, but this is not, in my opinion, a light, dainty Pinot Noir. It has some oomph, and I don't know if that's Kirk's hand in this. I don't know if it's the oak regimen or not. Julie Fogarty, I forgot to say hello to you. Kent, what are you doing in my cellar?
Somebody had to take it tonight.
My goodness, does that look like heaven?
So Martin, have you had Kirk's Croix Pinot?
I have not.
It's unbelievable. Same vein, just a little deeper and darker.
I like it. Is it a label that he consults for, or is that his own label?
That's his own label. So he went off of his regular vineyard just over the hill. And so it's close by and it's really taken off. It's a nice wine. But the price point's a little bit more than this.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately what happens quickly, right?
Right. But I agree with you. This is a steal, an absolute steal.
Which explains why we don't have any more.
Makes me happy that we have 8 bottles downstairs.
There you go.
I'd sell them for 20% over, guys. Anybody wants one?
Now, we actually, Kirk actually made a special project with Jack's. They had a special, and you may have heard about this when we had Dan Parrott on, when we interviewed Jack's Vineyard about 6-7 months ago. And Dan's the GM, part owner of Jack's, has been friends with Kirk a long time. But they made available to us 7 cases, of which we have 7 bottles left of a Petite Syrah that Kirk made. They bought the fruit. They only made 100 cases of it. We grabbed some of it. We have 7 bottles left. So if anybody wants any of that from from Kirk, it's not even on their website. So it's only kind of like one of those back deal. It's not on our website either. You have to kind of private message us, but it's a pretty special Petite Syrah. All right. Speaking of special, do we have any more comments on the palate, earthiness, taste of this Pinot Noir? Leah, Greg, you're awful quiet tonight. You guys had a big Thursday night, didn't you?
It's very similar to Nicholson Ranch, Martin. I don't know if you ever have been there, but it's very similar to Nicholson Ranch.
Mm.
Could you tell us any more about the Petite Syrah, like flavor profiles, things like that?
It's one of those beautiful, decadent, teeth-staining, dark blueberry Petite Syrah. It has tannin, it has structure. It literally, Jack's doesn't make a Petite Syrah, but Kirk came to Dan and said, hey, I've got Kirk, because Kirk is Kirk and Kirk has inside tracks on things. I've got dibs on this fruit. If you want to make a Petite Syrah, let's make this. It's from the Stag's Leap district, and it doesn't happen very often. So Dan said, pull the trigger, let's go. And I think it's a 2017. We'll check on that. The producer's checking. But yeah, it's pretty special. And if you want, Leah, I can send you an email afterwards and give you a little bit more detail.
I think the deal they offered that night, Martin, was if you bought a case of the Jack's Pinot Noir, they'd flip 1 bottle.
That is correct.
I think that's why I've got so much Jack's Pinot downstairs.
How is the Petite Syrah?
He hasn't opened it yet, have you?
I don't think I have.
Smart. And there's worse things than having 7 bottles of Jack's Pinot Noir. That is for sure. Awesome. Well, now we're going to move on to, I think, one of those steal of the centuries, the Onorama 2014 Cabernet Sauvignon. And these are the ones that I love. And I love the stories. More importantly, I love the price point, because I get angry when people say I found a great Cabernet in Napa and it's $125. I'm like, you could walk around blindfolded in Napa and find a great Cabernet for $125. There's not a lot of skill involved in that aspect. The real challenge is finding one that tastes like a $125 Cabernet that is half the price of that. You've got to go through a lot of tastings. You have to meet a lot of people. You have to do a lot of hand holding, a lot of experimentation. You go down in the barrel rooms, and finally you get to the places where you're like, okay, this is what's happening. And the Onorama 2014 Cabernet Sauvignon is one such place. And it's beautiful because, it might be one of those wines where people say, yeah, I can't find this in my Vivino app. I'm like, well, great. That's because it's not in distribution. So there's a lot of the wines on Cellar Angels that aren't in the apps because they don't have SKUs that are nationally distributed wines. So you won't find them for the most part because they are small producers. They made a scant, I think, 250 cases. So 5 barrels or 8 barrels, not a lot of wine made here. But this also has one of my favorite aspects with regards to location. So this Cabernet vineyard is right here. We just showed you millions of years of river bottom magic in Burgundy and Bordeaux. And here you've got the Napa River right here. Here you have Saint-Supéry. Here you have Péjus. Here you have Boulet Vineyard, BV. Here you have Camus. And this is all Beckstoffer vineyards right here. So you have essentially these folks that are farmers, that are growers and vineyard managers with this little slice of heaven of a vineyard right off the Napa River. So it's overflowed for thousands of years. That is essentially 3/4 of a mile from Camus, a little over half a mile from Saint-Supéry, less than a mile from Péjus, BV. All right, so not far, right? And this is not a big vineyard, so that you're not going to make 3,000 cases of wine from this vineyard block. And unless it gets annexed into one of these other wineries, and it actually may be owned by one of these other folks and they just farm it and sub some fruit out of it, it's not going to be a $175 cab. Every single Cabernet around is either twice or more expensive than this cab, at least twice or more. Some are 3 times as more. And the 2014 at sub $50 is rock star status. And it is just one of those wines that great everyday drinking wine for when you want to have, pandemics do a lot to the wine inventory, don't they? Tuesday night, you're opening up $85 bottles of wine and it's tacos and you're like, okay, you only live once. We're in a pandemic. Let's open up that bottle. Sunday morning, same thing. Am I the only one that puts up good bottles on Sunday morning? I see some people nodding. Thank you, Peter. Whew, I'm not the only one. So you have some magic here. And also don't forget, this is Rutherford. Remember, we always talk about Rutherford dust. And so you have that component as well, that you can't put a finger on it, but people have tried for a couple decades, that dusty mocha softness that anybody grew up with the chocolate milk flavoring called PDQ or Nestle Quick. And remember when you used to open up that tin and you could smell that, that waft of synthetic chocolate? Because there wasn't a 100% natural piece of chocolate anywhere near that can. That's kind of what that Rutherford dust is, that soft cocoa powder on the wine, which is amazing. And normally those are $100 bottles of wine. So at $45, it's a crazy, crazy good bottle of wine. And again, only 250 cases. So let's assess this. And no cheating, Mr. Glick.
I was going to ask you about Vandermint. Did you ever grow up with a bottle of Vandermint? The phony Dutch chocolate liqueur? It was a windmill bottle with a tulip on the top.
That literally, I'm already getting a headache just based on the description. That can't be good.
Oh, it was wonderful when you were 15.
Yeah, exactly. What was the stuff we sold at the store that was chocolate?
Chocolate wine?
Yeah, we sold a bottle of a wine called Chocovine, and we could not keep it in stock. It was like chocolate peppermint schnapps.
Vineyards with the chocolate in it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know that?
No. All right, color. I don't know why I'm looking at my Jack's Pinot Noir.
Not brown yet, though.
What do you get?
It's pretty dark burgundy.
Dark ruby.
Dark
Yeah.
ruby.
Dark ruby.
Oh,
This is
pale.
dark
I'm
ruby.
sorry. I'm sorry.
It better not say dark burgundy on the tasting notes, or I'm going to be disappointed.
Dark ruby.
Dark ruby.
That's-
Garnet. Forget ruby. Garnet.
Oh,
I like everyone. That's a great call, Peter, because there is a distinction between ruby and garnet, is there not?
Absolutely. Yes, Martin. I can't
Yes.
afford ruby cufflinks. I do have a pair of
Yeah.
garnet.
I think it's burgundy.
So I have some ruby slippers, but I don't
Oh,
have
really?
garnet slippers.
I'm coming to Naples to see them.
I don't have the legs for them.
We're gonna say darker than ruby. We think it's bordering on burgundy color. Dark. Sucker's pretty dark. Yeah. I can't read my notes through here, so it's got to be opaque.
There you go. Also 100% Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yeah.
So they didn't do any blending. Denise wrote the tasting notes, so send all emails of disagreements to her.
It says dark burgundy.
Where are the tasting notes?
They were up a little higher up.
Oh, I see. We did them differently this time.
Right there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's when we did them in narrative form.
Do you like narrative form or do you like the bullet point form?
Bullet point.
Yeah, full point.
ADD here.
Agreed.
We're Americans, we're impatient.
I thought it was just a millennial thing, but I guess not.
We could actually just make it a little WAV file. So you just click the link and we tell you what they are. So really it accentuates the impatience.
We switched it over because it was a Cellar Angels thing. So glad you all like it.
Yeah, dark Burgundy for sure. So I'd be curious, because this is now 7 years of age, and we've had this wine. We tasted it back in 18. We tasted it in 19. But for those of you, I know in Scotland, I feel terrible that one bottle was corked, but I'd be curious if anybody's drinking the Onrama assessments. Catherine's drinking out of a BV7. I like to see that.
Very good. Yeah, I think it's at its peak. I don't think it's going to get much better than this.
Why do you say that, Peter? What's triggering your thinking on that?
I don't get enough of the tannins.
Yeah.
Just hold it for another 2 or 3 years. I mean, plus or minus 1 or 2 years, but I would not put this away and come back in 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Right. I think we'd agree with you. Same thing. It's the tannins that are.
It's not a hit.
Yeah, it's clearly, it's drinking really well. It's like at a plateau.
Yeah.
I don't know how much longer it has, but it's really good.
It's terrific right now. Yeah.
Peter, I think we agree with you because we've got to drink over the next 2 to 5 years.
Yeah, thanks. How much is this bottle?
I think it's 45.
This is a steal at that price.
Oh my
Absolutely.
God. Yeah.
Surprisingly.
All day long.
I'd give it at least another year personally, but because I think there's still.
You think it's got a little more to go, Doug?
Your storages.
Mine does too, but I just opened it, so I it's hard to say, but mine still has that little bit of that tannin, so I think it might have a little bit.
I think Martin's at fault for not telling us to decant it about 45 minutes before.
We didn't decant it.
You are 100% correct because in my notes from Ivy, she said make certain they decant it for 45 minutes. So you are duly noted.
You owe me a free bottle.
Like everyone wants things for free.
Oh yeah.
Hang on.
I think it's interesting that the alcohol percentage is so low for a Cab Sav. 13.9, I think it was.
Crazy, right?
Yeah,
Really low.
can drink more.
Especially crazy coming from Napa.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's not like 14 was a cold year or anything. I could see it for an 11 maybe, but
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
No, great call, Jane. Hang on a second. I was signed in.
What's your password again?
It's password.
Yeah. You too?
Uh-huh. Admin. I didn't do well in the cybersecurity audit. $43.
There you go.
$43, 33 bottles remain, just under 3 cases. So yeah, and this is what I talk about, what I said at the beginning. We love finding wines of this caliber that are underneath 50 bucks. It isn't, we go crazy. And we always ask, how much can we have?
And I think the alcohol content has to do with Miriam's husband, who's the winemaker. He
Juan.
likes to make wine that are lower alcohol wines. He's also the vineyard manager, so he has a lot of control.
We had the fun chance to meet Miriam and Juan when we connected with Martin and Denise in Napa. We met at the Archer Hotel and they were there that night and opened a bottle of I don't know if it was the 14 or not, if it was something else that night, Martin. But
They bought
just
a couple
such
of
a delightful couple, unassuming. He's kind of a quiet guy. It was really neat.
Yeah, they do it well. Perfecto. Let me, so let's see. Still jealous of Kent's background. I don't know if that's a screensaver or actually in his cellar. I'm also, Jim Brubaker has an unbelievable background, which I learned this week is the Maroon Winery background. So that doesn't stink. That does not stink. So
Yeah.
last but not least, oops, I haven't shared. Probably couldn't see that. All right. So you nailed that one. It is a steal at $43. So you have thoughts and opinions. I think we've kind of gone through both the Pinot and the Cab. I thank you all for the assessment and the notes and the feedback. Was there a favorite between the Pinot and the Cab? For those of you that had both?
Different, but we're suckers for a great cab.
They're too different.
They're
They're
different.
really
Yeah, they're different.
Fair
As
enough.
Pinot Noirs go, we're big fans of Zoetic, but Meg, this Petaluma Gap area and the Pinots coming out of there, that's a great Pinot. Really is.
Yeah, it's a shame because very similar to Stagecoach in the vineyard that was acquired by Gallo in 2017 for 220 some odd $1 million. Wind Gap and Gap's Crown, those specific regions in Petaluma Gap have also been purchased. So a lot of the small producers that were sourcing fruit from there in the last 2 to 3 years, those contracts are now lapsing and are not being renewed. So it's tough to find those small little gems.
Will Jack's continue to have access to what they've got?
I believe so, largely due to Kirk's influence.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
You mentioned Chapelay. I think actually that the Jack's tastes very similar to the Chapelay Calesa bottle. And I think it means the winemaker's style of a more of a cab oriented taste to the Pinot as opposed to the like the Rocchioli and the Russian River Valley is much more delicate and pretty, I guess is a better word for it. But it's interesting.
No, that's a great point, Doug. And it's fascinating for us too, when you find these vineyards that are a little bit bigger, like the San Giacomo vineyard, where there might be a half dozen or more producers sourcing fruit from there. And each one is producing wines of, like say a Chardonnay or a Pinot Noir, but each one is a little bit different. And that's kind of the winemaker's influence. So the Chapelay, they've been producing Pinot Noir from the Calesa vineyard for a long time. I think it's 60 some odd dollars a bottle. So it's just a different flavor profile. Chapelay, obviously a much bigger name than Jack's. So there might be some marketing dollars behind that, but I don't know if I can blind taste them and be able to pick out which one. And at $12 or $15 less, my money would be on Jack's.
Martin, thanks for a great introduction to a new cab tonight. Had not had this, and it's outstanding. But I have to go with Kirk on the taste off. It's out. I mean, that's a wine that is very difficult to get, especially for this price point. So nice job.
Oh, thank you very much. Glad you liked it. That's the joy for us, is introducing great wines to people. So very, very thrilled to hear that. Thanks, Kent. The next week, ladies and gentlemen, he's back. This all started a year ago in the pandemic when we decided to do a little bit of a pivot and do SIP, which obviously stands for shelter in place. Now everyone is just a sipster, and it's very cool to be a sipster. But next week, our first SIP a year ago was with Chad Angelo from Angelo Cellars, who does source his Cabernet fruit from Stagecoach. And it is in addition to being a world-class Cabernet, he has probably, in my opinion, some of the coolest bottles of etched glass and label and silk printing that I've seen. Again, they aren't going to break the bank. They're below $100. I think they're $75. But Chad is going to be talking to us kind of germane to what we've been discussing, site-specific grape sourcing. So why would I pick this region for Cabernet? Why would I pick this soil for Pinot Noir or Chardonnay sorts of things? And as a winemaker, and by the way, Chad is also a rocket engineer. So that also goes hand in hand with regards to when you say it's not rocket science, it technically is with Chad, which is awkward when you say those things to him. But he's quite smart in this area, but certainly it'll be a lot of fun to have him back, and always great to have the wisdom, knowledge of someone whose hands are in the dirt, right? So you can get the firsthand information from a winemaker in Napa next week. You have survived 4 weeks of education from Martin. Thank you, Ivy. It's been outstanding. Hopefully no one hurt anything or pulled a muscle, and you all enjoyed yourself. Sean and Marilyn finally came on camera. Someone put some clothes on, finally. But obviously, you guys are great. We can't do this without you. And I'm going to raise the glass to all of you. I'm glad you're all safe. Hopefully, some of you have had your vaccinations. Give yourself a big round of applause. Thank you for all you do. We will see you next week because if it's Friday, it must be sip.
It's
Cheers,
sip,
stay
baby.
safe.
Cheers.
Be good.